Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by Blue Squared, your strategic digital partner.
All right, hey guys. Well, thanks for joining us again. I hope you've been enjoying our conversation around AI. It was going so well that actually we decided to do a multi-part series on this. So this will be part 2, and probably a part 3 will be coming with some demos and tips and tricks. But I think for today, the guys wanted to talk a little bit about the models back there and then some security issues that have popped up since we did the last recording. And we have also invited our CTO, Lan Key, to weigh in, who has his own perspective on how all this will work. So with that, I will turn it over to Kenny and Armin and let you guys talk a little bit about the models.
Yeah, so I think we talked at length around the OpenClaw application that the Blue Square team, Armin, has been working with around the product owner, the developer tester suite, and how they're using that to build end-to-end applications through the SDLC processes. And one of the topics that we kind of ran out of time on part 1 was the core piece of the model side. So OpenClaw is that orchestration engine that can orchestrate. And of course, my alarm goes off as I'm talking. So OpenClaw is the OpenClaw is the orchestration piece, but the models are really where a lot of what I've seen kind of called the brains of the operations. So with that, I want to kick it over to Lan and Armin to talk through a little bit more about their experience in using different models, how they went about using that within their agentic framework within OpenClaw, some considerations like cost, security, tokens, those kind of things too. So Armin, I'll kick it over to you. Lan, feel free to add anything as we go through as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, Anthony. And Lan, welcome to the party. So a little bit of a background on specific model strategy, right? So, and I want to use the word strategies because it is absolutely a strategy when you select models and how you're using your models with your agents. Initially, when I built it on my own environment, I just used a single model, single engine, a single agent, single model, right? And that agent was doing everything. Very quickly, I found out that it's probably not the best way to approach this, to give all of the different tasks to a single agent and then have it use the same model for, primary model, and there was no fallback model. And then there's also there's no per agent overrides. There's no differentiation between reasoning models and what models to use for triage classification, and then heartbeat, what models to use for coding specifically, right? So having a good strategy around how you build your agent stack and connect that to different models is a really good first step that someone who's building this would need to take and understand and plan properly. Therefore, down the road, your efforts are seamless, as well as you don't have to redo a lot of things. As you already know in our previous conversation, I've rebuilt this thing multiple times, and one of the reasons was because of the model usage, right? So I used Kimike, for example, for a little bit, as well as the OpenAI Codex model. And then first I used the OpenAI API model as opposed to a Codex, and then really quickly found out that it becomes very expensive that way, right? So cost control is a very, very important thing to consider when planning and when strategizing how are you using your agents and models. So in theory, what you should kind of have in your mind is what would be your primary model, and then what would be your fallback model, right? And then the cost structure associated with those. Then there's also some optional things that you can think about. There's some allow lists and catalogs that you can use. And then there also is specific overrides per agent, whether you would want to allow the agent to override on the model or not, right? Based on the models that you're selecting. Um,
So
so
Armin, sorry to interrupt. I just have a question just to help me
yep.
understand too. So when we talk about kind of your regular models and your fallback models, my understanding, I've actually been building, I've been using OpenClaw, and when you create an agent, right, the first thing that you select is a model as part of the process, and you say this is the model that this agent's going to use. Depending on the agent and the task, it makes sense to have different models. Not every model, each model's better at different things. And I've seen a lot of times you talked about Alfred, which is kind of your overall supervisory model. Everything that I've seen is using a deep reasoning model like Opus is a good area for this kind of orchestrator, and maybe you don't need Opus in the rest of the orchestration pieces because they might be less specific, like easier tasks to do. So I guess my first question to you is, when you talk about fallback models versus the regular models, what do you mean? Can you give an example of what that means?
So the fallback models are used specifically for cost control, right? So let's just say you have your primary model, and in your example, you're talking about Opus, right? So let's say you have an Opus primary model, and let's say you're using a pro version, which is I believe it's $20 a month or something like that. Um, Obviously comes with limitations, right? So you have certain amount of tokens that you can use. There are limitations on how much of those tokens are you going to use. And then at some point, let's say you reach the limitation of your model, of your primary model that you're using. You either have a choice of stopping your work and waiting for the reset to happen, right? So we actually had that problem a couple of days ago. We're using the OpenAI Codex model, and I was doing a lot of heavy wiring for the back end of the application, and that just kind of blew through all of my tokens, allowed tokens for the week. And I got stuck, right? So I had to kind of stop, pause, and kind of do some documentation and stuff like that until it reset it. Now, if you have a fallback model, then technically, once you run out of your allowed limitation on your primary model, it'll fall back to your fallback model. And the fallback model could be a more cost effective, probably slower, right? So like as an example, Kimike 2.5 would be a slower model, but it's free. If you get it through NVIDIA, if you're not going to pay, if you wanted to use a free model, you can get it through NVIDIA and not pay anything for it. And that could serve you as a fallback model. Therefore, you do not stop in your tracks and continue working, right? So
Didn't you have issues
Got it.
though when you were switching back and forth?
I did. So one of the things that I was having issues with is when switching between different models, and that was actually in an earlier version. So I didn't try it in the newer version, updated version of the OpenClaw. So that was an older previous version. You all know that OpenClaw releases updates almost on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, depending on how many issues they're having with the previous build. But in the initial builds, I was having an issue where the agent would, during the switch from a primary to a fallback model, it would switch, but it would never switch back. So it would just continue to stay within the fallback model over and over and over and over again. Even a couple of times, Len and I, we had to rebuild or ask to use a model for the OpenAI as a primary, and then for some reason the system would just continue to use the fallback model for, continuously, right? So there are some caveats there. There are some things to consider when using primary fallback models. There might be a lot of trial and error. We had that. So be cautious, but it's always good to have your strategy set on which models are you going to be using for primary, which models are you going to be using for fallback, and then also specify which models to use for specific agents for specific tasks, right? So that's very important as well.
And Armin, you brought up a really good point around trial and error, right? Every model is going to be different, better at certain things. And I can even think about in my daily life before I was trying to use OpenClaw and just using different chat agents, right? Between the Claude or GPT, I was trying to write some blog posts, and I provided an outline to Claude. And I said, "Can you go find some sources that meet this outline? Source them and put them in here." And it came back and it wrote a really well written article. And I was like, "How did it find these sources? This is amazing!" It cited them in APA format like I asked. And we were also talking about the human on the loop. So I looked at and started to follow into the sources to see how did it find such fantastic sources that met the examples that I wanted. Claude actually made up every single citation, created a URL link. Every URL link that I clicked gave a 404 error. It looked super real. It looked really, really well done. If I wouldn't have checked and tried that, I wouldn't have known that like Claude was doing this. So now I have, when I write blogs, I use GPT now because it has proven to me that it's better at this kind of thing. But if I want to create, JSON mockups or XAML files or whatever, Claude is so much better than GPT. So I see this application, behind the scenes with OpenClaw being the orchestrator, and kind of picking and choosing what models and starting to figure out which models do things better while you're trying to optimize cost, speed, probability of correctness, all of those kind of things, which I think is a really good point there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good point. You're bringing up a really good point specific to depending on what type of a task you're asking your agent to perform. Certain models are better for those tasks, right? In your example, you're pretty much using a research agent, right? So if you're using a research agent, when you're using a research agent, it's better to use a stronger reasoning tools or models, right? And OpenAI is much better at that than Claude. But then if you have a coding agent, if your agent is a developer agent, then definitely having a stronger code model like Claude, as an example, would be better to use in that sense, right? And then let's say if you have a support agent that is doing your customer support or something like that, you probably would use a much cheaper, faster model for that because it doesn't require a lot of reasoning, doesn't require to create code or anything like that, right? So again, combining the what tasks the agents are performing with what type of a model it's using, it's very, very important, very good. Therefore, your results are actually better at the end.
I think it's important to note, though, that
I think one of the things.
Go ahead, Lynn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things talking about the human in the human review, I think is a very important still at this moment, because sometimes, like you just mentioned, you asking an agent to run some blog, and then they get you back very good answers, and you'll never know whether the answer is right or wrong. Even a very strong research agent is still have the similar type of a problem at this moment from what we're seeing. And sometimes when talking about coding, I think Claude probably is much better. It's much better than Codex. Codex have a tendency that when you when asking for running something, he will try to follow whatever he can do and give you a result. And that result, if you are not testing it in detail, you will never know it. Just some of it is making up, and some of the logic you will never know it is okay until you dive into it. So the coding still have this type of problem too. But of course, research, it is another one. I think a lot of people are already seeing it. And the other thing on the coding side, it is that this agent usually produce a code kind of logically correct, but they are not optimized in a way like in the way for performance. That is, there's still a problem but of course, the newer agent improve a lot. And it's a very impressive to see that you give a problem, they can give you back an answer pretty quickly. However, if you look at the code of they generate on the answer, it's not necessary. It's always optimized.
Yeah,
So
and I've heard in the when I work a lot with engineering teams, and I've in a lot of my conversations I've heard if you're a new joiner, junior engineer, it can help a
mhm,
lot. If you're
yeah,
very senior, you might actually spend more time debugging and trying to figure out. But part of that is also from in my conversations and what I've heard from some of the senior developers I've talked with is also because the senior developers are going to get the more complicated tasks where it takes
hmm
a lot more experience to do that. So I don't know, Lan, if you have a similar thought process there, but that's at least what
yeah,
at least I've been hearing in my conversations. And I think eventually it'll get there,
yeah.
but it's not there right now for a true senior dev.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like you say. It is, yeah. There's some of these complicated problem is end up the senior people spend more time into the debugging or try to figure out what is wrong than helping. So
Yeah.
that is actually one of the things that nowadays many companies start looking into this one and kind of have a strategy to probably define the different tier of how this one will be applied. Because on the architecture side, it is sometimes very difficult to have AI to generate something for long term. But they can generate a solution very quickly, but it just cannot sustain for the productions. So
So Kenny,
Makes
that's
sense.
so I know we talked a little bit about what we were doing, and it's important to. And you also asked me also last time about SaaS applications, and what's interesting that's happened since we talked is that I mean you can see that Armin's taken a lot of time to do it, right? So it's not like anybody can just all of a sudden start doing this the way it's set up now. Plus, it's like in the old days, right? Some guy set up a spreadsheet, or somebody set up a spreadsheet to handle a certain type of um, process that they were trying to support. That person goes on to another job. Nobody knows how to do it. So it's a similar thing. Somebody builds a little custom application inside your organization to take advantage of leveraging AI, and then they leave. And okay, so now what do we do? How do we fix it? But what I did want to say, kind of to what Lan is talking about. So we use an augmented AI SDLC process, and the reason why is because in CGT, right, cell and gene, we need to be very agile and be able to adapt quickly, unlike kind of your bigger software houses that are still operating, and as they should, right, under a normal SDLC. But it doesn't mean, so for example, on the product management side, right, product owner can put in an idea, the thing can come back with a gherkin formatted requirement pretty quickly, and it can be handed off to a dev person at that point. Within development, we may not and don't really rely on AI quite as much for all the reasons that Lana said, right? Because sometimes it takes more time than if the person had just done it. Testing is different. So each one of these little silos, you have to figure out where you can really take advantage of it and where it makes sense and where it's not going to cost you actually more than if you hadn't done it, right? It's kind of like wasting your day on Instagram because you could, oh, this is really cool, but yeah.
A very important part of it too is, and Lan alluded to that as well, human in a loop is very important. And it's not going to go away by no means for a very long time. A human, it will stay in the loop for specific reasons, whether it's to check the work that the agent is doing or approval process or anything like that. Human still has to be in the loop. So technically, if you can think of agentic AI is a tool. It's not a replacement. It's a tool in your toolbox. It's a tool on steroids that you can use that can give you things faster, quicker, and allow you to actually make decisions based on the information that it's giving you, right? But in no way that it's replacing a human uh, uh, in their jobs, right? So it just becomes much easier to perform, and you can get things done faster. That's pretty much it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
And
I think one of the things it is that nowadays, when they say to replace AI replace human, I think it replace those repetitive type of job, and then those are easy thing to generate. However, I think the demanding for people have the the judgment of to justify whether the solution is right or wrong. I think those things, I think it is going to stay for a long, long time. So,
yep, I think it makes sense, Lan. And so maybe I know it was a great conversation. Maybe Armin, to kind of bring us back into the model for Foray, there were two other things I just wanted to ask you. So in that use case that we were talking about, we had the supervisory, then product owner, developer, tester. What models did you arrive at for each one of those before your fallback models? So what did you find is like the best use of the models for those agents in that
So
implementation?
yeah, so as a POC and as we're building, we're still using a single model right now, right? But what it gave us an opportunity to look at what is wrong with the using of that single model, right? We've played with a single model plus the fallback, and we figured out that there was a problem going back and forth. So we removed the fallback and continued to work with just a single model. Now with that single model and playing within the sandbox that we have, with the single model, which is the OpenAI Codex. We figured out that that would be the cheapest route as of right now because we're using our regular business account to use that and to use the tokens. Now that I've written a small paper on using within my own environment. So I have multiple different environments, right? So we have a main blue squared environment. Then I have my own environment that I play with. I consider that a scrap environment. Whatever I'm doing on it, I can just delete, do multiple iterations or whatever I want with it. Now, based on that environment, and I just started building multiple different agents as we are building it for SDLC process. So our product owner agent is most likely going to be using the OpenAI Codex model. Our development agent is going to be using the Claude Opus model for development for writing code. Now, our testing model, I'm still kind of playing around with using both OpenAI as well as the Gemini, and I want to see how Gemini reacts and how Gemini answers. A lot of the things with Gemini is very, very tight, and the stuff that it gives you is, I wasn't impressed with it as of yet. So right now, for me, OpenAI, Codex, and Claude are the two ones that I'm playing with. I haven't gotten to the documentation part of it, so I'm also assuming that maybe Gemini will come into play for documentation side of it because they do have a strong documentation, and it also embeds documentation within Gmail and GDocs and so forth. So it's kind of like within the ecosystem. So it might be easier to write documentation, place it in its proper place, and so forth, right? So
That makes sense. And if you've never seen, when you set up an agent in OpenClaw or ClaudeBot or whatever you want to call it, there is out of the box integrations that you can do. There's, I don't know, something like 15 agent or 15 models that you can point to, or 15 model providers that you can point to inside of that. So what Armin's talking about is when you set up each agent, OpenClaw allows the ability to say, I want to point to this provider, and then you can kind of pick the models inside of that. The other thing worth mentioning is right now there's kind of two ways to basically pay or not pay for models. There's kind of the subscription side. So when he's talking about codecs in OpenAI, which I heard rumor is going to go away eventually. I don't know if that's going to be true or not. But basically, you can just use your subscription to authenticate and use OpenClaw. In general, it's a lot cheaper of a way. It can range anywhere from like $8 a month to $200 a month for just like non-business use. And then there's the API way, which is where you have to make API calls, get an API key, and do that. And in general, that is much more costly to do that. So that's why Armin was also mentioning going down that Codex business subscription route. Right now, OpenAI does allow that. It's hard to say how much longer they will, because I can tell you it's like $200 a month for almost unlimited model, unlimited access. And I doubt they're going to keep that much longer, to be fully honest, because that cost is pretty insignificant comparatively for what's out there.
I'm still surprised that they still allow it, because technically, if you stay within your usage limit for the 5 hours and the 1 week, you can continuously go, and it only costing you $30 an hour. I mean, $30 a month, let's just say, or $20 a month. But with the API, my initial install in my personal environment, I used the OpenAI API, and within 1 day, I racked up almost $100 worth of API costs. So it becomes very expensive very quick.
I think Codex, it is the current way, the limitation, it is on the heavy usage, like what Almond did. When they run, they have a weekly limit and a daily limit. So that sometimes will block some of these heavy usage within those days. So because and those heavy usage usually is a spike. That is one way. And the other cheaper version, right now a lot of people go with it with the reasonable quality of a model. It is go to the things like AWS Bedrock, and once you sign up, you'll be able to use about 30-40 different models to choose from, and some of it is a pretty economical, I would say. It's not expensive at all. So, for example, the Minimax, which it is about 30 cents per million tokens for import. That is a pretty decent amount, and you can use on the needed basis. Compared to the OpenAI API usage, I think it's about close to $3 per.
Yeah, it's $4, almost $4.
So that is,
yeah.
that is a huge difference. So, and those models usually is a pretty good quality for a regular usage. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, thank you for the numbers, Land, because it helps to bring some of it to, what it actually looks like. And then, if you talk about scaling, obviously for businesses, there's enterprise plans and those kind of things. But I still feel that in the coming year to 2 years, there's going to be more of a reckoning on AI cost and optimization. I think we're in a stage of, and I think we're slowly coming out of the stage of experimentation. But I think previously a lot of enterprises were willing to kind of just invest and worry about kind of the upfront cost later. And I think we're seeing more focus on optimization moving forward. I think we'll really see it in the coming 1 to 2 years, at least in my opinion. So I think it's really important. I haven't seen any organizations, big enterprises, really go down the open source route. At least a lot of the clients I work with, they kind of use the big tech, kind of their private style hosting. I'm not sure if they'll ever, in the pharma side, ever get into the open source side, but we got there with development. So
you never know, because look at what Linux has done, in the past, right? So every single large enterprise used to be all on either Microsoft or Unix, paid, or Sun Microsystems, paid license versions. And then when Linux came out, a lot of these enterprises, if you go to their data centers, a lot of their applications and a lot of their backend is all running on Linux.
Kenny,
Yeah.
So
So
I
adoption
think
is going to be,
what do you actually mean
okay,
by that? Like they're
one of
running
the
their
things
own
about
version of.
The AI,
go ahead, Lane. I'll
go ahead.
answer Anthony's question after you go.
Okay, yeah. Talking about the AI, whether using host or using the cloud providing version, I think one of the things it is about the substantial or continuous usage. Because you hosting a model yourself for with the infrastructure, and be able to achieve the similar level of performance. If you in order to reach that, the the f- the initial investment is huge, and
Yep.
then you're running with the electricity, all of those things. Those costs actually is pretty big, unless you are using it like close to 24 hours per day. It is sometimes is economy is not justified to do it by yourself. Just basically the big tech or big provider is still wins in this sense. That's why there's still very popular to have a big data center hosted and providing the inference
Yep.
calculation for those. So
Yeah, it makes sense because then you're almost standing up a whole separate. You need to stand up a whole separate team of skills that some of these
right,
organizations
and they needed to
don't even
host it.
have.
Yeah,
Exactly. And what I meant, Anthony, is I've seen organizations on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to their strategy for utilizing models, right? LLMs. I've seen some that are very kind of cautious. They only really they have a partnership with one provider, right? Like an OpenAI. OpenAI kind of segregates everything that they're doing for them. Maybe not. Maybe they don't host it, but they kind of just use that. I've seen other organizations that have built a more AI platform so that you can kind of pick and choose what models you want to try to use, and what's accessible in kind of the more mature space. But even with that, a lot of the models that I've seen become available are still more of the private industry models versus the open source style. So that's what I meant too is I haven't seen in some of these big organizations, and I understand why. When open source is introduced, you got to have a lot more controls. You got to understand all of the potential vulnerabilities. How do you close? How do you fix? But we went through that with software. Open source software is used everywhere now. Every application is using usually some type of open source to do different things. So I would expect at some point the models will go on a similar journey of that. But I just haven't seen that, Anthony. So Armin was talking about some of the open source models that you can have access to out of OpenClaw. They're cheap, they're free because they're open source. But I really haven't seen them available to organizations. They don't really go that route from what I've seen, at least. And a lot of those companies, I will say, are based in the US or Europe, a much more heavy involvement in kind of the big tech side of things. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's all I was mentioning.
yeah, makes sense.
I think the open source that is another topic. I'll probably want to jump in a little bit on that. It is the open source. It is the source itself, and actually the hosting is still this big tech with hosting it. For example, Google just open source quite a few models from them. The Llama 3, and recently they have a Llama 4 just come out. And the Llama 4 actually, according to the initial review, which is a great system, a great open source model. And then Google also ranged from the original open source with a certain limitation with their own license, but now they totally adapt the Apache license for the open source. But open source, it doesn't mean that it has to be hosted by yourself or hosted by the organization itself. And like the AWS, within AWS, the Big Rock have a lot of model. It is open source, but they are hosting it, providing the compute for the inference. So that is the main difference. And also some company now also providing a way for those open source model to be tuned and hosted again for themselves and share the compute instead of you need to the organization need to buy the hardware and set up a data center to hosting those. So
Yeah, it's a good point, Len. It's all about compute now. I was listening to another AI podcast. Go ahead, Anthony.
And I was saying you talked a lot about okay, the models, the way that they're going to use it. It strikes me like a little bit like when you build a piece of software, you kind of need the requirement first. It feels to me, and I could be wrong, you guys can tell me, you kind of need a strategy first. What is it that you're trying to achieve with your AI tools, right? Okay, we're in a particular space where adaptivity, or the ability to adapt quickly, is super important, because let's say that the science changes or something, or the manufacturing process changes, and we don't want to have our tracking software lag behind or tell somebody, oh, you know what, our next release is in 3 months or in 6 months, and it doesn't quite work. So the strategy was there, and Armin had started to see, okay, that means that we can leverage this to, let's say, test quicker, or we can get our validation runs out faster and with higher quality. But it also strikes me that if you just kind of, oh, okay, here's some AI models and you guys can kind of have at it, you spend a lot of money, and I'm not sure you get anything out of it, right?
I can tell you the first thing I did when I was looking at my OpenClaw orchestration use cases, Anthony, is I built the process out, and I said, this is what I want to do. And then I built the starting point for the architecture of the orchestration that I wanted to do before I even thought about actually implementing kind of that use case. I think it's a similar kind of software design process, irrespective of if you're building an AI solution or you're building a software solution, right? There's still different, if you're building software, you still have to pick the code base, you still have to make sound technical choices. In AI, you need to do a similar thing, and to make those choices, you need to understand what are your goals, what are your objectives, what's your criteria, what are your trade-offs that you're willing to do. I think the process still should look very similar. Actually, I think it's actually even more important to do design. It's so easy to spin up things now that you can get ahead of yourself so quickly and be like, I need to step back, right? And I need to design. And I think I agree. I'll let both you guys talk, but my feeling that I get is like, people want to be hands-on and do it versus stepping back and designing and then doing. But I don't know. Sorry. The only thing I'll add, there is a level right now of experimentation that you need to try too. So it's kind of balancing so that you understand and learn, but also try, or also design based off of, experience. So I'll shut up now, but that was my my long answer.
So for us, what happened, exactly to your point, for us, what happened was initially when we ran the first POC, just to see how it works. There was no thought behind how do we architect it, what do we do, how do we apply it to our SDLC process or anything else. We just went at it, right? So I wanted to see if this thing can actually do things, right? If the agent can actually perform and give me what I'm looking for.
That's what.
And then,
but in the background, we were like, okay, let's see what he does, and there was some. Let's see what he does, and how can we leverage this, and
right. And then at the end, once we proved the POC, once the POC was done, and that small feature was built, and we all looked at it. What happened next was everything got scrapped completely from clean slate, right? So now that I'm building out this SDLC process exactly based on that, architecture first, wiring in the back end, making sure everything is sound on the back end without even seeing anything in the front or anything else, and then adding functionality and doing all of that things and training the agents and actually giving a thought. So I do think that trial and error, it needs to be there. You need to play with it. You need to figure out what it does. You need to know what it does. What are the pitfalls and what are the wins there? And then come back to the drawing board and say, okay, now what's the process that I want to handle? What that process looks like, let's architect it in the way properly and everything else that it actually does it and it executes the same way every time. So
But Kenny, this is very much like, and I think Lan, you have
Yeah, I
some thoughts
agree. I
on this.
think
This is
the
very, this is like, you know, old. I guess what was it, GE, right? You had your Skunkworks team that kind of tried out this new stuff. Let's go, and you don't blow up your, So Lan is running all of our software group, and from as the CTO. And you can think of Armin as a Skunkworks, right? Oh, this is kind of cool. I'm going to go play with it over here. But he doesn't blow anything. He doesn't blow anything up.
nothing in production. We're not touching
Well,
anything
yeah,
that is.
or our core process, right? Until we
Yes,
insert it where it's
yes.
supposed to be. But Lan, you wanted to comment on that, I think.
yeah, definitely. I think this is a process. It is the way. I think at least until this moment, the way it should be for solving a problem. So when we have a problem, the first thing is we try different approach to solving it, and we pick one of the right solution and a proven sustainable solutions. And until then, we just cannot. So we train the AI process to go through those to make sure that the output is reasonable. So among this time, I think each single step, the human review, it is just cannot be emphasized more. Just
Yeah.
We're not replacing humans, that's for sure.
yeah. So yeah. So I
Not for a
think that is
while.
the one of the things. Until then, yeah.
So Kenny, I don't know if you want to. I know we would like to maybe spend some time to show a demo and then do some tips and tricks, perhaps. And I know that the guys aren't quite ready for that. I don't know if you have any other questions, or you kind of want to just recap what we heard about models and some of the security issues. I'm not sure we actually talked about some of the security issues that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I think it's a good call, Anthony. So, what we're thinking is we've talked all about the use case, the open claw kind of experimentation, and borderline, almost production ready. I won't say it's production ready, but getting there. So we talked about the use case that you all built, how you did it, models, some security thoughts that went into it, the whole learning experience. So I think, moving forward, we'll look at an actual demo, and I think, ideally one of the next podcasts that we'll do. But one of the things that I also wanted to bring up, which, Anthony, thank you for giving me that hook, is actually between the time that we recorded this podcast 3 weeks ago and now, an article was just published. It's by a firm called CodeWall. And they have like an AI security platform. But what they do is they look for security vulnerabilities using their AI platform that kind of scrapes different companies, looks at their APIs, see if any of their APIs are exposed, not authenticated, not following good secure procedures. Again, this is before the AI era, so API management has been around for a very long time, at least over a decade, and there's good security practices. But now you can use these agentic platforms to now kind of just scrape and just relentlessly try to call APIs and figure out, are any of these unauthenticated? Can I get in? Once I can make API calls, these platforms can then start to say, okay, now what can I do, right? Can I get data? Now let me start to see if I can dissect the schema of the database and start making that. So this article got published a couple days ago, that this company called CodeWall actually, they hacked into BCG's data warehouse, which was 3.17 trillion rows, and they got through with zero authentication. So if you think about BCG's data warehouse, this is all the analytics that they've been using, their proprietary and analytics across all the works that they do with companies. CodeWall actually came out and said they had access to 533 million individual position histories with full text job descriptions, 8.7 billion employer joiner leaver records, 12.8 billion employee skills, 7.8 billion compensation benchmarks. And then on top of that, they got into client data, M&A data, consumer transaction, employment data.
Just in case, Kenny, BCG is
Yeah,
Boston Consulting Group, right? Just
Boston Consulting Group.
people are not familiar with the
It's
acronym.
a they help companies in strategy, long-term vision, all of those kind of things. So this is a really important proprietary asset for them and any of the big consulting firms, because this is how you can help companies understand the market, get an advantage in the market, all of that. So this was like a huge data breach, and they basically walked through the front door because BCG, they're hosting a lot of this in the cloud. They have APIs to make calls, and they just went through documentation. The platform, the AI platform, scraped all that documentation and then started to make the API calls and see where it went from there. And in today's day and age, and there's a lot of AI security. I'm by no means a full-on security expert. I've heard a term. There's security for AI and AI for security. It kind of goes in both ways nowadays. But I think this is a realistic example of the kind of, let's call it nefarious potential applications that AI can also do. So we talked about OpenClaw doing this orchestration. This is where the next wave of AI is with these orchestration platforms. So it's not always about productivity. It's also about the security. And this is a huge, huge challenge and risk moving forward in everything that companies are doing, especially as more and more gets exposed to the cloud. We talked a lot about Armin. We were talking about how you're hosting, in a virtual private server, aka it's a computer that's in the cloud. If you don't set up the right security protocols, right authentication, and another AI platform, no longer an individual, but an AI platform can like just start hitting all these APIs and start figuring out where are the areas that are now open. And we talked about that blast radius. This isn't just an AI thing. This is any area of software, any area of data sharing that is there. And I think I wanted to bring it up because it's a realistic example of how right now we're talking a lot of times OpenClaw, this orchestration. It's generally more user based. It's very small companies, but when we talk about broader picture, there's plentiful of orchestration platforms, custom built or open source like OpenClaw, that companies are running and spinning up. And I think this is just a really interesting application of that orchestration and the risks that are now involved.
What's interesting, Kenny, and I'll say this because I think we also run into this, I think, when consulting firms try to build software as a product. Maybe this will be controversial, what I'm going to say, but it seems like these guys, they're consulting firms, right? And they build these applications to support that, and that's what they're used to. I'm wondering, and not that SAP, Oracle, or the guys who actually build software I'm wondering if they're better at it because they actually think about software, they think about the security, and it's not as much about the output. Lan, you've spent a lot of time building software for decades now. We've done it ourselves together for like 20 years. So would you say that because we have a focus or your focus was on building software, that security and API layer security is always kind of at the forefront, or do you think there's some laziness and some vulnerability there?
Yeah, I think there's always I think before this AI wave, there's always some thought about, okay, I may have a problem, but no one probably be able to find it. But nowadays, AI bots like OpenClaw has become so easily available. And the AI agent is getting more and more, the AI platform itself is getting more and more capable. And like recently, Anthropic just get leaked by one of the hidden model they have, saying that one will be able to find so many vulnerabilities in the software. So now this one, it is no longer kind of we cannot take it easier anymore as a software builder. If we're building a software solution, the security now has become a very important thing. It
Yeah, but
always need to be scanning and make sure that your
are
problem
you
it is get
saying
fixed upfront. It's
are
no
you saying
longer
though
this
that
type of thought. No one be able to find it. Yeah, go ahead.
but are
No.
you saying though that so pen testing has been around for a while, right? Which is supposed to check for these types of vulnerabilities. I'm not sure that
Yeah.
when you're selling a piece
Mm-hmm.
of software to somebody, especially in a regulated environment, that's important. Are you saying though that
Mm-hmm.
that type of testing is maybe not where it needs to be in terms of being able to find vulnerabilities?
Yes, that's something I'm
I mean,
inquiring
I
to.
would agree
Like
with you, Lan.
this company if we're selling a software, sometime before this AI wave, everybody kind of getting another firm and running the pen test. And if the software is the company, it is small enough, no hacker are going to attack, right? And then in that case, usually you can have this excuse saying, "Oh, I may have a problem," but no one be able to finding it. And then this pen test company try to certify. They follow their set of fixed rule, try to find it, and that may not be able to find it. Nowadays, this AI tool be able to scrapping through and very creatively go through all these different things, which adding another thing it is for the software now. We need to be very proactively scanning for vulnerability like a software builder itself. So
Yeah, and I think, Lan, to your point, right? Testing, at the end of the day, there were levels of automation, but at the end of the day,
yeah,
there's still a fixed timeline, there's still
yeah,
fixed resourcing. It's a different ballgame now when you can just go unleash an agent and
yeah,
that agent
exactly.
doesn't
Yeah,
the
yeah,
only
yeah.
fix the only timeline it's on is how much money is it going to spend in tokens before it gets tired, basically. So,
Yeah,
it's
and some
just
of it is just a launch a free version. There's no
exactly.
money
So
to spend.
exactly. So I think it's just there's just more like there's just the AI can just do more
Yeah.
because it's not stop. It's going to work 24/7. You're not going to have your pen testers work 24/7 to try to
Mhm.
find everything. So
Well, that
yeah,
happened also when Armin ran some testing in our software. It found a couple. I think we talked about that last time, right? It found a couple of minor UI bugs that said, "Hey, you might want to look at this. You might want to look at that," which were pretty far remote. Very corner case where the human tester may not have seen it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, guys, shall we wind it up here and look for the next session pretty quick for Armin to do and maybe Lan to do a little bit of demo. I know Lan uses AI a lot in the development side of his job. What do you think? Shall we adjourn for now?
I think so.
yeah. Let's
All right, guys.
let's save the next episode for some truly hands-on showcase of what's
Yeah,
been done with
I'll
all this.
Yeah, I think what we'll try to do. So, guys, I mean, for those of you who are watching, and if you find this interesting, we'll actually go through a demo of doing an enhancement. I think Armin talked about that before to our software and how that works. I think that's part of the POC that he mentioned, and then we also built a financial app internally, but we'll see if we can't demo that as well with some dummy data in there, and maybe share some tips and tricks on what Armin found, and hopefully it's all secured and locked down, and nobody will come after it. So,
Well, right now, the way that our environment is set up is only specific IP addresses can hit it. You cannot, you should not be able to come through it. So,
and that's done purposely. So,
yes, it's not open to the public.
all right, guys. All right, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll look forward to the next session, and stay tuned. Thanks. See you guys.
Thank you.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.